The words access denied glowed red on my computer screen like a digital death sentence. Behind me, Derek crossed his arms with that smug smile I had grown to despise over the past 3 months. Security guards flanked him, waiting to escort me out of TechFlow Solutions after 12 years of dedicated service. He called me a relic, dismissed my contributions as outdated, and deleted my system privileges with the casual cruelty of someone half my age. But Derek made one critical mistake. I built SecureNet from the ground up, and deep in the system kernel, I left him a special gift. 3 months earlier, everything changed when Tyler Brooks walked through our office doors as the new vice president of engineering. I should have seen the warning signs immediately. Tyler was one of those executives who spoke entirely in buzzwords, throwing around phrases like digital transformation and agile methodology, while having zero understanding of actual software development. Within his first week, he promoted Derek Williams from senior developer to department head, bypassing 3 more qualified candidates with twice the experience. Derek had always been ambitious, but under Tyler's influence, he transformed into something genuinely dangerous. At 25, he possessed that particular brand of arrogance that comes from reading too many startup success stories and believing that youth automatically equals innovation. He began scheduling private meetings with Tyler, always closing the conference room door and speaking in hushed tones about modernization initiatives and team optimization. The first sign of trouble came during a routine code review. Derek questioned every decision I made, from variable naming conventions to algorithm choices. He had never challenged my methods before, but suddenly everything I did was legacy thinking or resistant to modern practices. When I explained the reasoning behind my architectural decisions, particularly the security protocols that made SecureNet virtually unhackable, Derek would nod condescendingly and make notes on his tablet. Within weeks, I found myself excluded from planning meetings that I had previously led. Projects I had initiated were reassigned to junior developers who lacked the experience to understand the complexity involved. Derek began holding separate team meetings, always scheduled when I was in client calls or debugging critical issues. My colleagues started avoiding eye contact, offering apologetic shrugs when I asked about decisions made in my absence. The harassment escalated systematically. Derek began documenting every minor disagreement, every moment of frustration when dealing with impossible deadlines or unrealistic client demands. He created a paper trail that painted me as difficult, uncooperative, and unable to adapt to new leadership. When I pushed back against a particularly reckless feature request that would have compromised our security standards, Derek wrote it up as insubordination and refusal to embrace innovative solutions. During our weekly one-on-ones, Derek would lecture me about embracing change and staying relevant in a rapidly evolving industry. He suggested I might benefit from additional training in modern development practices, despite the fact that I had been writing code since before he graduated high school. He questioned my commitment to the team, my willingness to mentor junior developers, and my ability to deliver results under pressure. The psychological warfare was expertly executed. Derek isolated me from my colleagues by creating an atmosphere of suspicion and competition. He rewarded team members who reported conversations with me, turning casual workplace friendships into potential sources of betrayal. He assigned me to projects with impossible timelines, then criticized the results as evidence of declining performance. Tyler, meanwhile, remained conveniently oblivious to the toxic environment Derek was creating. During company meetings, he praised Derek's fresh perspective and innovative leadership approach. He spoke about the need for cultural transformation and bringing new energy to established teams. The subtext was clear: veteran employees, like myself, were obstacles to progress, dead weight that needed to be eliminated. The breaking point came when Derek announced a new policy requiring all senior developers to undergo performance evaluations conducted by junior team members. The humiliation was intentional and calculated. Watching 22-year-old programmers critique code I had written before they learned their first programming language was designed to break my spirit and force my resignation, but I refused to give Derek the satisfaction of quitting. I documented every instance of harassment, every unfair evaluation, every impossible deadline. I believed that evidence and professionalism would ultimately prevail, that Tyler would see through Derek's manipulations and restore sanity to our department. I was naive enough to think that 12 years of exceptional service and countless successful projects would count for something. The final insult came during my formal termination meeting. Derek sat across from Tyler, presenting a thick folder of performance concerns that painted me as a liability to the team. He cited my resistance to feedback, my inability to adapt to new methodologies, and my negative impact on team morale. Every documented disagreement, every frustrated email, every moment of human imperfection had been weaponized against me. Tyler nodded gravely as Derek outlined his concerns, occasionally glancing at me with what appeared to be genuine sympathy. But his mind was already made up. The decision had been reached weeks earlier, probably months. This meeting was merely a formality, a legal requirement before discarding me like obsolete hardware. As security prepared to escort me from the building, Derek leaned back in his chair with visible satisfaction. He had successfully eliminated the one person who truly understood SecureNet's architecture, the one person who could challenge his authority or question his technical decisions. In his mind, he had cleared the path for unlimited power and recognition, but Derek had no idea what I had actually built into SecureNet's core systems. He saw only the surface-level functionality, the user interface, and basic features that impressed clients and generated revenue. The real genius of my design lay buried deep in the system kernel in subroutines so elegant and hidden that even the best programmers would need months to discover them. As the security guards waited by the door, I looked directly at Derek and smiled. He interpreted it as resignation, the defeated expression of someone accepting their fate. He could not have been more wrong. Cleaning out my desk should have been a simple process of gathering personal items and saying goodbye to colleagues. Instead, it became the moment I uncovered the true scope of Derek and Tyler's betrayal. As I packed my collection of programming books and family photos, Tyler's voice drifted from the nearby conference room where he was conducting what he believed to be a private phone conversation. The intellectual property transfer should be seamless, Tyler was saying, his voice carrying the confidence of someone discussing a routine business transaction. We've been systematically removing legacy fingerprints from the code base, documenting everything as collaborative team development rather than individual contributions. I froze, my hand still wrapped around a coffee mug that bore the logo of a programming conference I had attended 5 years earlier. The conversation continued, each word confirming my worst suspicions about their intentions. Derek has been brilliant at repositioning the narrative, Tyler continued. By the time we complete the sale to Quantum Systems, there won't be any trace of individual authorship. SecureNet will appear to be the product of innovative team collaboration under Derek's leadership. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Derek had not simply wanted to eliminate me from the team, he had been orchestrating the theft of my life's work. SecureNet represented 6 years of my creativity, innovation, and technical expertise. The security protocols that made it revolutionary were born from countless late nights of research and experimentation, drawing on advanced cryptography techniques I had developed during my graduate studies at MIT. I remembered those early days at TechFlow when I was just 31, hungry to prove myself in a company that gave me the freedom to pursue ambitious projects. SecureNet began as my personal initiative, a response to the growing cybersecurity threats facing small businesses. While my colleagues worked on conventional software solutions, I envisioned something fundamentally different, a security platform that could adapt and evolve, learning from attack patterns and strengthening its defenses automatically. The initial prototype took me 18 months of 80-hour weeks to complete. I wrote every line of the core architecture, designed every algorithm, and solved every technical challenge through pure determination and intellectual rigor. The breakthrough came when I developed a new approach to encryption key management, creating a system that could generate and rotate security keys without human intervention while maintaining perfect synchronization across distributed networks. TechFlow's executives were skeptical at first. The technology seemed too advanced, too complex for practical implementation. But when I demonstrated the prototype's ability to repel sophisticated attacks that had crippled our competitors, their skepticism transformed into enthusiasm. SecureNet became TechFlow's flagship product, generating millions in revenue and establishing the company as a leader in cybersecurity solutions. My contributions were documented extensively in the original design specifications, JIT commit histories, and patent applications that bore my name as primary inventor. But as Tyler's phone conversation revealed, Derek had been systematically erasing that evidence, rewriting history to position himself as SecureNet's creator. The beauty of Derek's approach, Tyler was explaining to his contact, is that he's eliminated the problematic personalities while preserving institutional knowledge. The remaining team members are young, flexible, and completely loyal to his vision. There won't be any inconvenient claims of individual ownership when we finalize the transaction with Quantum. I understood now why Derek had been so methodical in pushing out veteran employees. It was not about cost savings or cultural change. It was about removing witnesses who could contradict his version of events. Every senior developer who departed took with them institutional memory about SecureNet's true origins. The junior employees who remained knew only Derek's carefully constructed narrative about collaborative development under his leadership. The cruelty of their strategy was breathtaking. By eliminating me specifically, they removed the one person who possessed comprehensive understanding of SecureNet's architecture. The junior developers could maintain and modify the existing code base, but they lacked the deep knowledge necessary to question Derek's claims of authorship. They would never know that the elegant algorithms they maintained daily were the product of my individual genius, not collaborative team effort. Quantum Systems represented the perfect buyer for their scheme. As TechFlow's largest competitor, they had been trying to develop equivalent security technology for years without success. Acquiring SecureNet would instantly position them as the market leader while eliminating their primary rival. Derek and Tyler would profit handsomely from the sale while destroying the company that had given them their careers. The phone conversation ended, and I quickly resumed packing my belongings as Tyler emerged from the conference room. He approached my desk with an expression of manufactured sympathy, clearly intending to offer some patronizing words of encouragement about my future prospects. Blythe, I want you to know that this decision was not made lightly. Tyler began, his voice carrying the practiced sincerity of someone accustomed to delivering bad news. You've made valuable contributions to TechFlow over the years, and we genuinely appreciate your service. I looked up at him, wondering if he truly believed his own words or if he was simply performing for the benefit of nearby colleagues. His eyes revealed nothing but practiced corporate empathy, the emotional equivalent of a prepared statement. Derek speaks very highly of your technical skills, Tyler continued, but sometimes organizations need to evolve in new directions. I'm confident that someone with your experience will find exciting opportunities elsewhere. The hypocrisy was staggering. This man was actively participating in the theft of my intellectual property while offering me career advice and false encouragement. He spoke about organizational evolution while orchestrating the systematic destruction of everything I had built. His words about Derek's respect for my abilities were particularly galling, given that Derek was simultaneously working to erase all evidence of my contributions. As Tyler walked away, Derek approached with his characteristic swagger. He made a show of helping me carry boxes to the elevator, playing the role of gracious victor for the benefit of watching colleagues. His performance was flawless, combining professional courtesy with subtle dominance in a way that reinforced his position as the new leader. I hope there are no hard feelings, Derek said as we waited for the elevator. This industry moves fast, and sometimes difficult decisions are necessary for the greater good of the team. I nodded politely, resisting the urge to confront him about what I had overheard. My silence seemed to please him, confirming his belief that I was accepting defeat gracefully. He interpreted my calm demeanor as resignation having no idea that I was already formulating plans for what would come next. The elevator doors closed, and Derek disappeared from view. But his words echoed in my mind as security escorted me from the building. He had called me a relic, dismissed my contributions as outdated, and eliminated me from the company I had helped build. What he did not realize was that relics often contain hidden power, and the code I had written years earlier was about to remind him of that fundamental truth. The first phone call came 3 days after my termination. Sarah Chen, senior engineering manager at Data Vault Corporation, had been scheduled to interview me for a principal architect position. Her voice was uncomfortable as she explained that they had decided to go in a different direction, pursuing candidates with more contemporary experience and collaborative working styles. The language was carefully neutral, but the subtext was clear. Someone had contacted Data Vault with concerns about my professional capabilities. Sarah had worked with me on 2 successful integration projects over the past 4 years, so her sudden reluctance to move forward with my candidacy made no sense unless she had received negative information from an external source. Over the following weeks, a disturbing pattern emerged. Companies that had previously courted my expertise suddenly became unavailable or unresponsive. Hiring managers who had reached out to me on LinkedIn went silent after initial conversations. Technical recruiters who typically fought over senior architects with my credentials stopped returning my calls. The realization hit me during a conversation with Professor Williams, my former advisor at MIT, who had been instrumental in developing my early interest in cryptographic systems. He had recommended me for consulting opportunities in the past, so I reached out hoping he might know of academic projects or research initiatives that could benefit from my experience. Blythe. Professor Williams began carefully. I received a rather concerning phone call last week from someone claiming to be your former supervisor at TechFlow Solutions. My stomach dropped as he continued. Derek had contacted my mentor, the man who had guided my graduate research and understood my technical capabilities better than anyone in the industry. The conversation had been expertly crafted to seem like a professional courtesy rather than a malicious attack. This Derek individual expressed concerns about your recent performance and suggested that you might be experiencing some personal difficulties that were affecting your professional judgment, Professor Williams explained. He claimed to be worried about your career prospects and wanted to ensure that anyone considering working with you understood the challenges you were facing. The sophistication of Derek's character assassination was remarkable. He had not made specific accusations that could be easily disproven, instead painting a picture of general decline and personal instability. By framing his attack as concern for my well-being, he had made it nearly impossible for recipients to challenge his motives or question his sincerity. Professor Williams, to his credit, had been skeptical of the unsolicited contact, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and he admitted that the conversation had made him hesitate before recommending me for opportunities. Even people who knew my character and capabilities were being influenced by Derek's campaign of destruction. The scope of his efforts became clear when Jake Morrison, my former business partner from a startup we had founded together 7 years earlier, awkwardly declined to meet for coffee. Jake and I had remained friends after selling our company to a larger firm, regularly consulting each other on technical decisions and industry trends. His sudden distance was completely out of character. When I pressed him for an explanation, Jake reluctantly admitted that he had received a LinkedIn message from Derek, warning him about my recent struggles and suggesting that association with me might damage his professional reputation. The message had included carefully selected details about my termination presented as evidence of performance problems rather than the political maneuvering it actually represented. Derek had done his research, identifying key relationships in my professional network and systematically poisoning each one with carefully crafted narratives. He understood that the tech industry thrived on reputation and referrals, making character assassination a devastatingly effective weapon against veteran professionals like myself. The financial pressure mounted as my job search continued to yield nothing but polite rejections and uncomfortable silences. My savings which should have been sufficient for several months of unemployment, began dwindling as I paid for career coaching professional development courses and networking events that produced no tangible results. The psychological impact was even worse than the financial strain. I had built my identity around technical excellence and professional achievement, but Derek's campaign was systematically destroying both. Colleagues who had once sought my advice now avoided my calls. Industry contacts who had valued my insights suddenly had no time for conversations. The respect I had earned over 15 years in the field was evaporating through no fault of my own. The cruelest blow came when my unemployment benefits were challenged by TechFlow's Human Resources Department. They claimed that my termination was performance-related rather than a layoff, which could potentially affect my eligibility for compensation. The irony was devastating. Derek had stolen my life's work while simultaneously attempting to prevent me from receiving basic financial support during my unemployment. The hearing required me to defend my professional competence before a state administrative judge who had no understanding of software development or technology industry politics. TechFlow's legal representatives presented Derek's carefully documented performance concerns as objective evidence of my declining capabilities. They had witness statements from current employees supporting their narrative, most of whom had never worked directly with me, but were repeating Derek's version of events. I sat in that sterile government office, listening to my career being systematically destroyed by people who had never written a line of code or solved a complex technical problem. The judge's questions revealed his confusion about the technical aspects of my work, making it difficult to explain how Derek's criticisms were either irrelevant or deliberately misleading. The unemployment hearing concluded with a partial denial of benefits pending additional investigation into the circumstances of my termination. The state agency would review TechFlow's documentation and interview additional witnesses before making a final determination. In the meantime, my already limited financial resources would be further strained. As autumn turned to winter, I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about my professional abilities and personal worth. Derek's character assassination had been so thorough and effective that even I began wondering if there might be some truth to his accusations. Maybe I was becoming obsolete in a rapidly changing industry. Maybe my resistance to his leadership really did indicate an inability to adapt and grow. The isolation was complete. My professional network had been systematically compromised, my financial security was threatened, and my confidence in my own abilities was shaken. Derek had achieved something remarkable. He had convinced an entire industry that one of its most accomplished practitioners was actually a liability and a failure. But even in my darkest moments, I never forgot what I had built into SecureNet's core architecture. Deep in the system, kernel patient and invisible, my true masterpiece waited for the right moment to reveal itself. Derek had destroyed my reputation, stolen my work, and nearly broken my spirit. What he had not done was discover the gift I had left for him years earlier, before I could have imagined needing such protection. The coffee shop on Fifth Avenue had been our regular meeting place for years, where Amy Rodriguez and I would discuss everything from complex debugging challenges to office politics over oversized lattes. Amy had started at TechFlow as a junior developer 5 years earlier, and I had taken her under my wing, teaching her advanced programming techniques and guiding her through the maze of corporate culture that often intimidated newcomers. She was already seated when I arrived, nervously stirring a cappuccino and avoiding eye contact. Her usually confident demeanor had been replaced by something I had never seen before, guilt mixed with desperate self-preservation. The conversation that followed would become the final devastating blow in Derek's systematic destruction of my professional life. "I have information you need to hear." Amy began, her voice barely above a whisper, despite the busy afternoon crowd providing natural cover for our conversation. "But first, I need you to understand the impossible position Derek has put me in." Her revelation unfolded slowly, each detail more disturbing than the last. Derek had not simply eliminated me as a competitor for influence and recognition. He had been methodically planning the removal of every senior developer who possessed institutional knowledge about SecureNet's true origins and development history. There's a list, Amy explained, glancing around the coffee shop, as if Derek might materialize at any moment. 4 more names besides yours. Janet from the database team, Michael from network security, Patricia from quality assurance, and Robert from systems integration. All the people who were here when SecureNet was actually being developed. The strategic brilliance of Derek's plan was becoming clear. By eliminating the witnesses to my individual contributions, he could rewrite history without contradiction. The remaining team members would know only his carefully constructed narrative about collaborative development under visionary leadership. Future employees would have no reason to question the official version of events. Amy detailed Derek's timeline with the precision of someone who had been forced to participate in planning her colleagues' professional destruction. Janet would be targeted for failing to adapt to modern database management practices. Michael's expertise in network security would be dismissed as legacy thinking that impedes innovation. Patricia's decades of quality assurance experience would be rebranded as resistance to agile development methodologies. He's offered me Janet's position as senior database architect. Amy continued, her voice heavy with shame and desperation. If I help transition the remaining senior developers out of their roles, I'll receive a promotion and a 30% salary increase. The betrayal cut deeper than any of Derek's previous attacks because it came from someone I had genuinely cared about and invested in professionally. Amy had been like a younger sister to me, someone whose career I had nurtured with the same dedication I might have shown my own daughter. I had written recommendation letters for her graduate school applications, nominated her for technical achievement awards, and defended her ideas in meetings where junior developers often struggled to have their voices heard. I tried to protect you, Amy insisted, tears beginning to form in her eyes. When Derek first started building his case against you, I argued that your technical expertise was irreplaceable. I pointed out that you had designed most of the core systems that keep our products competitive. But Derek had been prepared for resistance from Amy and other junior developers who might feel loyalty toward their mentors. He had systematically isolated each potential ally, offering promotions and financial incentives in exchange for cooperation, while making it clear that refusing to participate would result in being added to his elimination list. He knows exactly which buttons to push, Amy explained. My mortgage payments are $2,000 a month. My daughter's childcare costs another $1,500. Without this job, I would lose everything within 3 months. Derek made it very clear that opposing his leadership decisions would be career suicide. The moral calculus was brutal but understandable. Amy had been forced to choose between abstract principles of loyalty and fairness versus the concrete reality of financial survival. She had a family to support, bills to pay, and a career to protect. Derek had engineered a situation where doing the right thing would result in personal destruction for anyone brave enough to take a stand. The worst part, Amy continued, is that I know you're the real genius behind SecureNet. I've seen your original design documents, your research notes, your patent applications. But Derek has convinced Tyler that innovation only happens through collaborative team efforts, not individual contributions. She provided devastating details about how Derek planned to complete the intellectual property theft. The remaining original documentation would be archived and made inaccessible to current employees. New team members would receive training materials that presented Derek as SecureNet's primary architect. Company marketing materials would be updated to reflect the collaborative development narrative, eliminating references to individual contributors. Within 6 months, Amy explained, there won't be a single person left at TechFlow who can contradict Derek's version of events. The junior developers who remain will genuinely believe that SecureNet was created through team collaboration under his leadership. The systematic nature of Derek's character assassination extended beyond TechFlow's walls. Amy revealed that he had been contacting employees at competing companies, sharing carefully crafted concerns about the departing senior developers. He framed these conversations as professional courtesy, warning other organizations about potential hires who might bring negative attitudes or outdated approaches to their teams. He's particularly proud of how he handled your situation, Amy admitted with visible disgust. Derek boasts that he eliminated the company's most knowledgeable architect while making it impossible for you to find equivalent work elsewhere. He calls it a masterpiece of strategic personnel management. The conversation reached its emotional climax when Amy begged for my forgiveness, while making it clear that she would not jeopardize her financial security for principles of justice or loyalty. She wanted my understanding and absolution for a betrayal she knew was morally indefensible but practically necessary. "I can't afford to be a hero," Amy said, her voice breaking with emotion. "I wish I were brave enough to stand up to Derek and tell Tyler the truth about what really happened. But I have responsibilities that are bigger than my personal integrity." Her request for forgiveness was simultaneously heartbreaking and infuriating. I understood the financial pressures that drove her decision, but her betrayal represented the final collapse of everything I had built at TechFlow. The mentoring relationships, the collaborative spirit, the shared commitment to technical excellence had all been corrupted by Derek's toxic ambition. As we prepared to leave the coffee shop, Amy provided one final piece of information that crystallized the hopelessness of my situation. Derek had been documenting our meeting through a private investigator he had hired to monitor my activities during unemployment. My attempts to gather information about TechFlow's internal operations could be presented as evidence of corporate espionage or attempted sabotage. "Be careful who you trust going forward," Amy warned as we stood on the sidewalk outside the coffee shop. "Derek is more paranoid and thorough than you realize. He's anticipating every possible move you might make and preparing countermeasures." Walking home that evening, I reflected on the completeness of my isolation. My professional network had been systematically poisoned. My closest ally had chosen self-preservation over loyalty, and my attempts to understand Derek's plans had potentially exposed me to additional legal jeopardy. The young man who had dismissed me as a relic had proven remarkably sophisticated in his understanding of power manipulation and strategic destruction. But Amy's revelation had also confirmed something important. Derek's confidence was built on his belief that he had eliminated all threats to his narrative. He genuinely thought he had won completely, that his victory was so thorough that no counterattack was possible. His arrogance and sense of invincibility would ultimately become the foundation of his destruction, though he could not yet imagine how deeply I had prepared for exactly this scenario. Sandra Martinez possessed the kind of legal reputation that commanded immediate respect throughout Silicon Valley. Her track record in intellectual property litigation was legendary, with successful cases against some of the tech industry's most powerful companies. When she agreed to take my case, I felt the first genuine hope I had experienced since my termination from TechFlow 6 months earlier. "Your documentation is extraordinary," Sandra observed during our initial consultation, spreading my meticulously organized evidence across her conference room table. Get commit histories, original design specifications, patent applications, email correspondence, discussing your individual contributions to SecureNet's development. This is exactly the kind of evidence that wins intellectual property cases. Her confidence was infectious. Sandra explained how similar cases had resulted in substantial settlements, not just financial compensation, but public acknowledgement of the true inventors and developers behind stolen technologies. She outlined a strategy that would expose Derek's theft while potentially resulting in criminal charges for corporate fraud and conspiracy. "Derek Williams and Tyler Brooks have made a critical error," Sandra continued. "They've left digital fingerprints everywhere. Their email communications, internal documentation, witness statements, all of it creates a clear pattern of intentional theft and deception. We're not just talking about wrongful termination here. This is systematic intellectual property fraud." The initial legal filings generated immediate media attention. Technology industry publications picked up the story, framing it as a cautionary tale about ageism and intellectual property theft in Silicon Valley. Several prominent tech executives offered statements of support, condemning the treatment of veteran developers and calling for stronger protections against corporate theft of individual innovations. For 3 weeks, everything proceeded according to Sandra's predictions. TechFlow's initial responses were defensive and evasive, suggesting that their legal team was struggling to develop coherent counterarguments. Derek's media appearances were awkward and unconvincing, his youthful arrogance appearing petty and unprofessional when contrasted with the substantial evidence of my contributions to SecureNet. The first sign of trouble came when TechFlow's legal team produced documentation that Sandra had never seen before. Detailed project management records showed Derek as the primary architect of SecureNet, with my role described as senior contributing developer rather than lead designer. The documentation appeared authentic, complete with digital signatures and timestamp verification that would be difficult to forge. This is sophisticated. Sandra admitted her confidence beginning to waver as she examined TechFlow's evidence. They've created a complete alternative history of the project, one that positions Derek as the visionary leader and you as a talented but subordinate team member. The forged documentation was accompanied by witness statements from current TechFlow employees who supported Derek's version of events. Amy Rodriguez, my former mentee and friend, provided particularly damaging testimony describing Derek's leadership during SecureNet's development and my supporting role in implementing his architectural decisions. Amy's statement is devastating, Sandra explained during an emergency meeting at her office. She claims that while you made valuable technical contributions, the innovative breakthrough that made SecureNet revolutionary came from Derek's vision and strategic direction. Her testimony carries tremendous weight because of her technical expertise and her previous relationship with you. But the most crushing blow came when Professor Williams, my former MIT advisor, testified on behalf of TechFlow. His statement acknowledged my technical capabilities while suggesting that my recent behavior indicated possible personal or professional decline. He expressed concerns about my ability to accurately recall events from several years earlier, particularly given the stress of unemployment and ongoing legal proceedings. Your mentor's testimony is particularly problematic, Sandra said, her voice heavy with professional disappointment. He's not directly contradicting your claims, but he's raising questions about your current mental state and reliability as a witness. Combined with the forged documentation and witness statements, we're facing a much stronger defense than I anticipated. TechFlow's countersuit alleging corporate espionage represented the final devastating escalation. Their legal team claimed that I had stolen proprietary information during my employment and was now attempting to use that stolen material to support false claims of intellectual property ownership. They demanded return of all company-related documentation and sought financial damages for the alleged theft. The evidence supporting their espionage claims was circumstantial but persuasive. Security logs showed that I had accessed to sensitive project files in the weeks leading up to my termination activity that could be interpreted as preparation for intellectual property theft. My unemployment period meetings with former colleagues, including Amy, were presented as attempts to gather additional confidential information for use in litigation. The espionage allegations change everything, Sandra explained during what would become our final strategy session. Even if we prove your original contributions to SecureNet, the countersuit could result in criminal charges and financial penalties that would exceed any potential settlement. We're looking at a scenario where winning the intellectual property case might still result in your personal and financial destruction. Legal fees had already consumed most of my savings, and Sandra's estimate for continuing the litigation through trial was financially impossible given my unemployment status. The monthly cost exceeded my entire unemployment compensation, creating an unsustainable financial burden that would require liquidating my retirement accounts and potentially mortgaging my home. The final insult came when Sandra recommended settling both cases to avoid bankruptcy and potential criminal prosecution. TechFlow was willing to drop their espionage claims in exchange for my agreement to abandon the intellectual property lawsuit and sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement preventing future challenges to their narrative. This is not the outcome I expected when we filed, Sandra admitted with visible frustration. Their legal team has been extraordinarily thorough in creating alternative documentation and witness testimony. Fighting this through trial would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars with no guarantee of success, and the potential downside includes criminal liability. The settlement negotiations were humiliating. I was forced to publicly withdraw all claims related to SecureNet's development while acknowledging Derek's leadership role in the project. The non-disclosure agreement prevented me from discussing the case or challenging TechFlow's version of events in any public forum. In exchange, they agreed not to pursue espionage charges and to provide neutral employment references for future job searches. Signing those documents in Sandra's conference room represented the lowest point of my entire professional life. Derek had not simply stolen my work and destroyed my reputation. He had manipulated the legal system itself, creating false evidence and manufactured witness testimony that transformed my legitimate claims into apparent fraud. The sophistication of his planning was remarkable and terrifying. The final blow came when I lost my apartment 3 weeks later. The legal fees and months of unemployment had depleted my financial resources beyond recovery, and my damaged professional reputation made finding new employment nearly impossible. I moved into my sister Jennifer's guest bedroom in Sacramento, a 42-year-old woman reduced to depending on family charity because of one man's calculated cruelty. Jennifer tried to be supportive, but the awkwardness of the situation was undeniable. She had her own family to consider, her own financial pressures and professional responsibilities. Having her unemployed older sister living indefinitely in her home created tensions that no amount of good intentions could completely eliminate. The psychological impact was devastating. I had built my identity around professional achievement and technical excellence, but Derek's campaign had systematically destroyed both. The legal defeat confirmed that merit and truth were insufficient protection against sophisticated manipulation and institutional corruption. Justice was not an abstract ideal, but a luxury available only to those with sufficient resources and political connections. During those dark winter months in Sacramento, I watched Derek receive industry recognition for creating SecureNet. Technology publications featured him in articles about innovative young leaders, and he was invited to speak at conferences about cybersecurity architecture. His transformation from ambitious subordinate to respected industry expert was complete and seemingly irreversible. Tyler Brooks announced TechFlow's acquisition by Quantum Systems for $250 million, with Derek receiving a substantial bonus and promotion to Chief Technology Officer of the merged companies. The press release praised his visionary leadership in developing revolutionary security solutions that positioned the combined entity as the market leader in enterprise cybersecurity. But even in my deepest despair, I never forgot the gift I had embedded in SecureNet's core architecture years earlier. Derek's victory appeared complete, but his triumph was built on stolen foundations he did not truly understand. The code I had written during those early development cycles contained possibilities he could not imagine, scenarios I had prepared for during a time when such extreme measures seemed like paranoid fantasy rather than practical necessity. The wait would be longer than I had initially planned, the personal cost higher than I had anticipated. But patience had always been one of my greatest strengths as a programmer, and the most elegant solutions often required time to fully mature and execute. Derek's celebration would continue for several more months before he learned that some relics contained more power than their modern replacements could ever imagine. The phone rang at 6:17 in the morning on a Tuesday in March, jarring me awake in Jennifer's guest bedroom. The caller ID showed Derek Williams, a name I had not seen on my phone since that humiliating termination meeting 8 months earlier. His voice carried a panic I had never heard before, the composed arrogance replaced by raw desperation. "Blythe, we need to talk," Derek said without any greeting or pleasantries. "Something catastrophic has happened to SecureNet, and you're the only person who might understand what's going wrong." The irony was exquisite. The man who had called me a relic, who had stolen my life's work and destroyed my reputation, was now begging for my help. I dressed quickly and drove to the 24-hour diner he had suggested, curiosity overcoming any remaining anger about his previous treatment. Derek looked terrible. His usually perfect appearance had been replaced by the disheveled desperation of someone who had not slept in days. Dark circles ringed his eyes, and his hands shook slightly as he clutched a coffee cup like it was his only remaining anchor to sanity. The entire SecureNet infrastructure collapsed yesterday at 3:42 p.m., Derek explained, his voice barely controlled. Not just a system failure or a routine outage. Everything. Customer databases, security protocols, backup systems, everything just died. He described the cascade of failures that had begun with seemingly minor glitches in the authentication module. Users reported being randomly logged out of their accounts, followed by error messages indicating corrupted security certificates. Within minutes, the problems escalated to complete system shutdown across all customer installations. It gets worse, Derek continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. The failure exposed our entire customer database to potential breach. Financial records, personal information, proprietary business data from Fortune 500 companies. We're looking at the largest cybersecurity failure in industry history. The timing was perfect, though Derek did not yet understand the significance. Quantum Systems had completed their acquisition of TechFlow just 2 weeks earlier, with the Derek receiving his promotion to Chief Technology Officer and substantial financial bonus for his role in developing SecureNet. The catastrophic failure occurred during the critical integration period when both companies were most vulnerable to reputation damage and customer defection. Here's what I don't understand, Derek said, leaning across the diner table with growing desperation. The failure patterns don't match any known attack vectors or system vulnerabilities. It's like the software is systematically destroying itself from the inside out. I maintained a carefully neutral expression while Derek described the technical symptoms. The authentication module, corruption, the cascade of security certificate failures, the systematic exposure of encrypted customer data. Everything was proceeding exactly as I had designed it years earlier, when such scenarios seemed like paranoid fantasy rather than practical necessity. Our entire technical team has been working around the clock for 36 hours, Derek continued. Amy Rodriguez, Janet Patterson, everyone with advanced system knowledge. But none of us can identify the root cause or develop effective countermeasures. The beautiful irony was that Derek had eliminated the one person who possessed comprehensive understanding of SecureNet's true architecture. Amy and the other junior developers could maintain and modify the existing codebase, but they lacked the deep system knowledge necessary to understand what was actually happening. They were treating symptoms while remaining completely ignorant of the underlying cause. The code appears to be self-modifying, Derek explained with growing confusion. Security protocols that worked perfectly for years are suddenly generating random encryption keys that don't match existing authentication databases. It's impossible unless someone programmed the system to behave this way intentionally. My preparations had been far more sophisticated than Derek could imagine. During SecureNet's original development, I had embedded multiple hidden subroutines deep in the system kernel dormant code that would remain invisible during normal operations. The activation trigger was elegantly simple. If my administrative credentials were terminated without proper succession protocols, the hidden routines would begin their work. There's something else, Derek said, his voice becoming even more strained. The media is starting to connect this failure to your wrongful termination lawsuit from last year. Some technology reporters are suggesting that Quantum Systems acquired stolen intellectual property and that the system failure might be related to original developer protections. The public relations disaster was exceeding my most optimistic expectations. Major technology publications were investigating the connection between my lawsuit, Derek's rise to prominence, and the catastrophic system failure. Industry analysts were questioning whether Quantum Systems had performed adequate due diligence before acquiring technology with disputed ownership claims. Stock prices for both companies have dropped 40% since the failure began, Derek continued. Customer contracts are being canceled, potential lawsuits are being filed, and the SEC has announced an investigation into our acquisition practices. The kill code's secondary functions were also performing flawlessly. The hidden subroutines had not simply crashed SecureNet, they had systematically exposed evidence of Derek's intellectual property theft. Original design documentation was appearing in public repositories, complete with timestamps and digital signatures, proving my authorship of the core architecture. The worst part, Derek said, his voice breaking slightly, is that Git histories we thought were permanently deleted are somehow reappearing. Your original commit messages, your research notes, your patent application drafts. Everything we worked to archive is becoming visible again. The technical elegance of my revenge was particularly satisfying. The kill code had not simply destroyed Derek's stolen empire. It had meticulously documented the evidence of his theft for public examination. Every deleted file, every modified timestamp, every forged piece of documentation was being systematically exposed and corrected. Derek's phone buzzed constantly throughout our conversation, each call bringing new reports of customer defections, media inquiries, and legal threats. Tyler Brooks had called an emergency board meeting, and Derek faced the possibility of criminal charges related to the acquisition fraud that was being revealed through the ongoing system failures. I need your help to stop this. Derek finally admitted his arrogance, completely replaced by desperate humility. You're the only person who truly understands SecureNet's architecture. Whatever protection or safeguard you built into the original code, I need to know how to disable it. The moment I had imagined for 8 months had finally arrived. Derek Williams, the man who had destroyed my career and stolen my life's work, was begging me to save him from the consequences of his own actions. His transformation from confident predator to desperate victim was complete and deeply satisfying. I looked across the diner table at this broken young man and smiled. The expression seemed to terrify him more than any angry response could have accomplished. He understood, perhaps for the first time, that his victory had been built on foundations he did not control or comprehend. Derek, I said calmly, I think you need to learn an important lesson about the difference between understanding code and simply using it. His face went pale as the implications of my words registered. The kill code was not simply a destructive program that could be easily disabled. It was an integral part of SecureNet's architecture, woven so deeply into the system's foundation that removing it would require rebuilding everything from scratch. Derek had stolen my work without understanding its true complexity, and now that ignorance was destroying him. The relic he had dismissed so contemptuously was about to teach him the most expensive lesson of his career. 3 months after that desperate diner meeting with Derek, I stood in the executive conference room of CyberShield Technologies, looking out at the San Francisco skyline while reviewing the final terms of my employment contract as Chief Technology Officer. The view was spectacular, but not nearly as satisfying as the headline displayed on my laptop screen. Former TechFlow CTO Derek Williams pleads guilty to federal fraud charges. The complete collapse of Derek's empire had exceeded even my most optimistic projections. The kill code's systematic exposure of his intellectual property theft had triggered multiple federal investigations into corporate fraud, securities manipulation, and racketeering conspiracy. Tyler Brooks faced additional charges for his role in orchestrating the illegal acquisition scheme, while Amy Rodriguez and other employees who had provided false testimony were negotiating plea agreements in exchange for cooperation. The technical evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. The hidden subroutines I had embedded in SecureNet's core architecture had methodically documented every aspect of Derek's fraud, creating a digital audit trail that prosecutors described as the most comprehensive corporate crime evidence they had ever encountered. Git histories, email communications, financial records, witness statements, everything had been preserved and cross-referenced to create an unshakable case. The beauty of your approach, explained FBI cybercrime specialist agent Patricia Gonzalez during one of our interview sessions, is that the suspects created their own evidence. Every attempt to cover up their theft was automatically documented and preserved by the same system they were trying to manipulate. The legal vindication had been swift and decisive. Sandra Martinez, my former attorney, who had recommended settlement to avoid bankruptcy, reached out with profound apologies and an offer to represent me in the civil litigation that followed the criminal convictions. The financial settlement from Quantum Systems exceeded $12 million compensation for stolen intellectual property, damaged reputation, and punitive damages for the systematic campaign of character assassination. But the monetary reward was less satisfying than the professional rehabilitation that followed. Technology industry publications that had previously ignored Derek's theft now featured extensive articles about my contributions to cybersecurity architecture. The MIT Technology Review published a comprehensive profile examining how my innovative encryption methods had revolutionized enterprise security, acknowledging me as one of the field's most influential but under-recognized pioneers. Professor Williams called personally to apologize for his testimony supporting TechFlow's false narrative. His investigation into Derek's deception had revealed the sophisticated pressure tactics used to manipulate character references and professional testimonials. He offered to write letters of recommendation for any position I might pursue, acknowledging that his previous statements had been based on deliberately misleading information. Your case has become a landmark example of intellectual property protection, Professor Williams explained during our reconciliation meeting. Law schools are studying your embedded documentation system as a model for how individual inventors can protect their work from corporate theft. Jake Morrison, my former business partner, who had distanced himself after Derek's character assassination, reached out with a joint venture proposal that would leverage my cybersecurity expertise in developing next-generation privacy protection tools. The startup funding included backing from several prominent venture capital firms whose portfolio companies had been affected by the SecureNet collapse and wanted to ensure stronger security architectures for their investments. The industry-wide impact of Derek's downfall extended far beyond individual vindication. Major technology companies implemented new policies protecting senior developers from age discrimination and ensuring proper attribution for innovative contributions. The Blythe Protocols became standard practice for documenting individual intellectual property contributions in collaborative development environments. CyberShield Technologies had recruited me specifically because of my experience with Derek's fraud and my innovative approach to embedded security documentation. As their new chief technology officer, I was implementing comprehensive protection systems that would prevent similar intellectual property theft while fostering genuine collaborative innovation among developers of all experience levels. My first initiative involved establishing mentorship programs that paired senior architects with junior developers, ensuring knowledge transfer while protecting individual contributions through sophisticated documentation and attribution systems. The goal was creating an environment where experience was valued rather than dismissed, where innovation could flourish without the toxic competition that had characterized Derek's approach. What you've accomplished here transcends simple revenge, observed Dr. Rachel Torres, the industrial psychologist CyberShield had hired to study workplace dynamics in technical organizations. You've created a framework that protects individual innovation while fostering genuine collaboration. It's exactly the opposite of the zero-sum competition that enabled Derek's destructive behavior. The personal healing had been gradual but profound. Jennifer was incredibly supportive during my transition back to financial independence, celebrating each milestone in my professional rehabilitation. Moving out of her guest bedroom and into my own San Francisco apartment represented symbolic closure on the darkest chapter of my career. The new apartment was in a building overlooking Golden Gate Park, close enough to CyberShield's offices for easy commuting, but far enough from the South Bay Tech Corridor to avoid unwanted memories. I had furnished it simply but elegantly, creating a space that reflected my renewed confidence and professional stability. The most satisfying moment came when Amy Rodriguez requested a private meeting to apologize for her betrayal and seek career advice. The young woman who had chosen financial security over loyalty now faced professional ostracism as one of Derek's collaborators. Her promotion had been rescinded, her reputation damaged, and her job prospects limited by association with the fraud scandal. "I understand if you never want to see me again," Amy said during our uncomfortable coffee meeting. What I did was inexcusable regardless of the financial pressure Derek created. I let fear override my principles, and I'm living with the consequences. Her remorse appeared genuine, though I remained skeptical of her motives. Amy's betrayal had been particularly painful because of our mentoring relationship and my investment in her professional development. But I also recognized the moral complexity of Derek's manipulation tactics and the genuine financial pressures that had influenced her decision. Everyone makes choices they regret, I replied carefully. The question is what you learn from the experience and how you apply those lessons going forward. I provided her with a conditional recommendation for a junior developer position at a nonprofit technology organization that specialized in digital privacy tools. The work would be meaningful, but financially modest, requiring Amy to rebuild her career from a much lower starting point. Her acceptance of the position without complaint suggested genuine commitment to professional rehabilitation rather than opportunistic relationship management. The most profound satisfaction came from the industry-wide changes sparked by Derek's downfall. The Securities and Exchange Commission implemented new regulations requiring detailed documentation of intellectual property ownership for technology acquisitions. The Department of Justice established a specialized cybercrime unit focused on corporate theft of individual innovations. Professional engineering organizations adopted ethics codes that specifically protected senior practitioners from age-based discrimination. 6 months after Derek's sentencing, I received an invitation to testify before a congressional subcommittee examining age discrimination in the technology industry. The hearing provided a national platform to discuss systematic bias against experienced professionals and the importance of protecting institutional knowledge in rapidly evolving fields. The dismissal of senior practitioners as relics represents a fundamental misunderstanding of how innovation actually occurs. I testified before the packed hearing room. Experience and wisdom are not obstacles to progress. They are the foundation upon which genuine advancement is built. The congressional testimony generated significant media attention and policy discussions about protecting veteran workers in technology-driven industries. Several states introduced legislation modeled on my recommendations, creating stronger legal protections for experienced professionals and establishing penalties for systematic age discrimination in hiring and promotion practices. Derek's personal downfall had been as complete as his professional destruction. His federal conviction resulted in a 4-year prison sentence, substantial financial penalties, and permanent prohibition from serving as an officer or director of any publicly traded company. The young man who had dismissed experienced professionals as obsolete was learning firsthand about the consequences of arrogance and ethical shortcuts. Tyler Brooks received a longer sentence due to his leadership role in the conspiracy, while Quantum Systems faced massive financial penalties that ultimately forced the company into bankruptcy. The corporate wreckage served as a powerful deterrent to other organizations that might consider similar intellectual property theft schemes. The final vindication came when the Technology Innovation Hall of Fame inducted me as a Lifetime Achievement recipient, specifically recognizing my contributions to cybersecurity architecture and my role in exposing corporate fraud in the technology industry. The ceremony was attended by hundreds of industry leaders who had previously been influenced by Derek's character assassination campaign, but now understood the true scope of his deception. Standing at the podium to accept that award, I reflected on the journey from Derek's dismissive Relic comment to this moment of professional triumph and industry recognition. The kill code had been more than a technical achievement. It had been a statement about the enduring value of experience of patience and ethical behavior in an industry that too often prioritized youth and ambition over wisdom and integrity. True innovation, I concluded in my acceptance speech, comes not from discarding the lessons of the past, but from building upon them with respect, understanding, and genuine collaboration across all generations of practitioners. The audience's standing ovation was gratifying, but not nearly as satisfying as the knowledge that my experience had created lasting change in how the technology industry treated its most experienced and knowledgeable professionals. Derek had intended to eliminate me as an obstacle to his ambition, but his actions had ultimately strengthened protections for countless other veteran developers who might face similar discrimination. As I left the ceremony that evening, I thought about the message I wanted to leave with everyone who might face similar betrayal and injustice in their own careers. Sometimes the most powerful response to those who dismiss our worth is not immediate confrontation, but patient preparation and the quiet confidence that excellence always reveals itself in the end. What experiences have you had with workplace betrayal or age discrimination? How did you handle the situation? And what advice would you give to others facing similar challenges? Your stories and insights could help someone else navigate their own difficult circumstances. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find it. Subscribe for more content about overcoming professional challenges and share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of patience and preparation in achieving justice. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that every professional setback can become the foundation for an even greater comeback.